Decades in the NBA are often defined by dynasties. The Showtime Lakers and Bird-led Celtics of the 80s, the Jordan-led Bulls of the 90s, the Kobe Shaq Lakers and Duncan Pop and Co. Spurs of the 2000s. Hell, I can even go back to the 60s, a decade defined and completely dominated by the Bill Russell-led Boston Celtics. As for the modern era, the most recent dynasty was the Curry, Clay, and Dre Warriors of the latter half of the 2010s, plus their chip in 22. Cool, you stated a bunch of iconic dynasties of NBA history. What's your point, Ryan? What's the significance? Well, it's this. The past 5 years of the NBA has seen a different championship team. Raptors in 19, Lakers in 20, Bucks of 21, Warriors of 22, and the Nuggets of 23. This exemplifies the parity that exists in the league, that has existed in this modern era of the NBA. There are so many teams loaded with talent in the league now, it's insane. This abundance of talent has made it incredibly hard for any team to get a second chip in this 5-year span, let alone repeat. It's only a matter of time though, right? Aren't dynasties inevitable? Doesn't a team come around that is just completely head and shoulders greater than the other 29 it competes with? Some team has to come along and claim the 2020s as their decade. Time's running out though, because we're damn near halfway through. So that brings me to the title of this video. Who will be the NBA's next dynasty? Now before we answer that question, or just investigate it, I have to define what a dynasty is, and of course this is going to be my opinion. Everybody's going to have a different opinion, but these are the standards that I think every dynasty has hit. Well, it's kind of just one standard. I think roughly similar to this ratio, chips to years ratio. Around 3 chips in a 9-year span, or 4 and 12, 5 or 15, just around a third of the time that a dynasty has existed, that team would have to win the championship, 33%. With a consistent nucleus. I think that's really the only standard that a team has to maintain in order to be called a dynasty. And of course, this is my opinion. So, these are all the teams that qualify, based off of my criteria. Bill Russell Celtics of the 1960s, a core of Bill Russell, Bob Cousy, John Havlicek, Red Auerbach as the coach, and Sam Jones. 11 rings, Bill Russell was there for all of them, out of 14 seasons. A staggering percentage that we will call the chip rate of 78.6%. Next, we have the Showtime Lakers, core of Magic Johnson, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Pat Riley coaching, James Worthy, and Michael Cooper. A time frame that lasts from Magic Johnson's rookie season to the last year that the Lakers made the championship and lost to the Chicago Bulls. Out of 12 seasons, they won 5 times for a chip rate of 41.7%. Larry Bird's Celtics existed at the same time as the Showtime Lakers. This was the era that really brought in the eyes and the viewership of basketball. The core featured Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, and existed from Bird's rookie season to his last elite season before his injury that really derailed his career. Out of 10 seasons, they won 3 of the chips for a chip rate of 30%. Lower than the 33% bar that I established, but it's close enough, so I'm going to label them as a dynasty. Of course, we have Jordan's Bulls that dominated the 1990s. The core was Jordan, Pippen, and Phil Jackson coaching. This was a time frame of 9 years. They won 6 of those chips for a staggering chip rate of 66%. We have the Duncan and Pop era of the San Antonio Spurs, starting with the Spurs' first championship in '99 and ending with their last championship in 2014, because that was really the last we saw of Duncan as an all-star caliber talent, in my opinion. This was the longest lasting dynasty, lasting longer than Bill Russell's Celtics. This dynasty lasted 16 years, won 5 chips in that span for a chip rate of 31.25%. We also have the Kobe Shaq Lakers. A lot of people label this team, or at least this duo, as the most dominant duo in NBA history. A core of Shaq, Kobe, Phil Jackson coaching, prominent role players Rick Fox, Robert Horry, and Derek Fisher. A time frame of 8 seasons from the 97 postseason to the 04 postseason. Featured a three-peat from 2000 to 2002. Out of 8 years, they won the chip 3 times for a chip rate of 37.25%. And the most recent dynasty, the one that kind of defined the modern era of basketball, the Golden State Warriors, the Splash Bro Warriors, a core of Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, and Draymond Green was the big three, coached by Steve Kerr with vital role players Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston. Time frame of 2015 from the Warriors' first championship to their last in 2022, and we're going to count the 2023 season as part of their dynasty because they were still a prominent NBA playoff team. They won the chip 4 times in 9 years for a very solid chip rate of 44.4% in their dynasty. There are some notable omissions that a lot of people are probably clamoring about. One being the bad boy Pistons of the 90s. They won the championship in back-to-back seasons, but I think to be labeled as a dynasty, you have to win at least 3 times. And that's going to be a running theme. Hakeem Olajuwon's Rockets in the 90s went back-to-back in the years that Jordan was vacant in the 90s. Unfortunately for Olajuwon, even though he was an elite talent, one of the greatest talents the league has ever seen, he never really had that go-to number 2 for most of his prime until he got Clyde Drexler for the second championship. The Kobe Powell Lakers of the latter stages of the 2000s decade. My favorite team of all time. It will always be my favorite team of all time because Kobe is my favorite player. And those were the 2 years that I really started watching basketball, when I was 9 and 10, when the Lakers won in 09 and 2010. They went to 3 straight finals, but only won 2 of them. Even though they were back-to-back, I think you gotta win 3 in order to be labeled as a dynasty. And finally, the big 3 Heat went to 4 straight championships, only won 2 of them, even though they promised to win not 5, not 6, not 7. Went back-to-back, but like I said, I think you gotta win at least 3 chips to be labeled as a dynasty. Couple of side notes. The 1970s, kind of like a dark age of basketball. Maybe it's because there was no face of the league for that decade. There wasn't really a team that dominated the decade and claimed it as its own. This was the decade kind of between faces of the league. Bill Russell and the Celtics were the face of the 60s. Magic, Bird, the Lakers, and the Celtics were the face of the 80s. And another thing is that LeBron has never been part of a dynasty by my standards. Is that why people hold him back from being the GOAT over Jordan? Because Jordan dominated the 1990s with a team, with the Bulls. Of course, Bron has individually dominated the 2010s, but none of his teams have really dominated in terms of winning championships for the majority of a decade. Now, we can get to who is likely to be the league's next dynasty. I have 5 potential outcomes, and we're going to start with the clickbaity, maybe, thumbnail of the video, the OKC Thunder. Why can they be the next dynasty of the league? Well, they currently are a contender. They're the top team, or tied for top team in the West, depending on what day you look at the standings. They're an elite team, and they have an MVP caliber talent in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Nikola Jokic is my favorite player in the league, but I gotta give it to Shai. I think he's the MVP this season. Not only that, they also have 2 ascending stars behind him in J-Dub and Chet Holmgren. They have a young coach in Mark Daigneault, who's already proving to be one of the best in the league, and he's only going to get better with more experience. An S-tier GM in Sam Presti, who has garnered an extensive portfolio of first-round picks for the next 5 or so years. But why not? It might be hard for them to retain their young talent. We've seen OKC have a great assortment of young talent in the past with KD, James Harden, and Russ, and eventually they all left the team for one reason or another. I just worry about once J-Dub, Chet Holmgren reach the end of their rookie contracts, it might be hard for Sam Presti to retain all of them. And also, there's no guarantee that J-Dub and Chet Holmgren hit their ceilings to really push this team to being a dynasty. Next, I want to get to the Boston Celtics. Currently the best record in the entire league. They're currently a contender. They have an MVP caliber talent in Jason Tatum, an elite starting 5, definitely the best starting 5 in basketball, and a tremendous GM in Brad Stevens. They're my championship favorite going into the season, and they're a lot of people's championship favorite now. What could hold them back from becoming the league's next dynasty? They have a shorter window with the starting 5. I think the salary cap questions and concerns I had about OKC can be multiplied when you look at Boston, because Drew Holiday's got an upcoming player option. Jason Tatum's contract runs out in about 2 years. Al Horford's getting older. Derek White is going to be a very, very attractive asset when he hits free agency. And with Jaylen Brown having $300 million guaranteed over the next 5 years, money's going to be an issue for Boston sooner rather than later. And Joe Mazzulla, in my opinion, also has some questions to answer about his coaching ability and ability to make adjustments in high-pressure playoff moments. I'd be remiss if I did not address the Denver Nuggets. They're currently a contender and have the best player in the league, in my opinion, in Nikola Jokic. They have an elite head coach in Mike Malone, and they have the most team chemistry in the entire league. I think they are the team that they don't have an overabundance of talent. They're not going to overwhelm you with all their talent at every position, but I think they just work the best together and have players that just fit their roles and can coexist. Jamal Murray forming the best two-man game in the entire league with Nikola Jokic, defenders inside and out with KCP and Aaron Gordon, and an elite knockdown shooter who works perfectly off of the top two players on the team in Michael Porter Jr. And they also have young players developing in the background off the bench in Peyton Watson and Christian Brown. And they've already done the hard part. They've won the first championship and have an opportunity to go back-to-back, something we haven't seen done since the Warriors in 18 and 17. Why not the Nuggets? There's not many reasons that I could come up with to derail the Nuggets from becoming the next dynasty in the league. It's just that the West is getting increasingly tough to win in. There's a lot of top dogs out west, a lot of young teams that are ascending out west that can knock the Nuggets off their current mantle. But other than that, this roster is perfectly constructed, and the opportunity is for the taking for them to become the next dynasty of the league. Now, this next team is kind of a dark horse, the San Antonio Spurs. There's only one real reason why the Spurs can become a dynasty, and it's Wemby, and Wemby. And of course, Popovich is the best coach of all time, but Wemby is a generational talent, and he has an extremely high ceiling, one that rivals the likes of Jordan, Braun, Kobe. Not saying that he's definitely going to be a top 5 player of all time, but he can definitely be a face of the league. He's something we haven't seen, and he's proving in year 1 to be probably a top 15 player in the league. So if that's his starting mark, what is his finish line? When you have a player of the caliber of Wembanyama and the ceiling of Wembanyama, the sky is the limit for your team as long as you can surround him with the adequate talent. And that's kind of the reason why the Spurs might not be the NBA's next dynasty, because there's no guarantee that they do surround Vic with the adequate talent to be a championship contender year in and year out. And I hate to say it, but Popovich is getting a bit older. He did get an extension, but there's no guarantee for how long Popovich is going to be around to coach the Spurs. It is what it is. Now, out of these 4 teams, the team I like the most to become the next dynasty is the Denver Nuggets. Part of that could be biased because, like I said, Jokic is my favorite player in the league right now. But I mean, this team just works very well off of each other players-wise. Jokic involves everybody. I think nobody is upset with their roles. Michael Porter Jr. is a shoot-first gunner who you would think might want to command more touches and more shots, but he's perfectly fine in the role he's in, working off of Jokic, playing behind Jamal Murray. They just have so many players that fit their roles, and they have elite decision making in the front office, a top tier head coach, one of the best players in the league, probably the best in my opinion, and a dynamic 2-man game. And I don't think there's a problem of players clamoring for a higher salary and wanting to leave because of that reason. I mean, we saw that with Bruce Brown, but with Aaron Gordon and MPJ, Jamal Murray, I think they're all perfectly content in their roles in Denver and really want to win more championships, not just the one in 2023. So if I had to pick a team to be the next dynasty in the league, it would be the Denver Nuggets. Now, I mentioned 4 teams, but I said that there are 5 outcomes regarding this question as the league's next dynasty, and that 5th outcome is that there is no dynasty of the 2020s. Why? Because of the extreme amount of parity in the league that I mentioned before. There's so many teams out west that are viewed as contenders. But the bottom line is that there are so many top tier teams in the league right now. The amount of talent and top heavy teams in the league, it's insane, and that's really the reason why it makes it hard for teams who contend over and over and dominate a decade, the amount of parity. Now, whether or not there is a dynasty that claims the 2020s as the decade of insert team here, I'm still going to be an NBA fanatic. Why? Because I'm a simple man of very few loves and passions, one of the few being the NBA. But I'm a representative of the NBA superfan, one who enjoys parity, which entails going into every NBA season without a clear-cut championship favorite and observing the pursuit of the moniker face of the league, partaken by a handful of players. Parity intrigues us NBA fanatics. But there's another NBA fan, the casual fan, someone who knows the top guys in the league, the top teams in the league, watches basketball in April, May, and June only, and someone who truly gravitates to the NBA when there is a clear face of the league or a true team that defines a decade or era of basketball. Magic, Kareem, and the Lakers, Bird and the Celtics garnered the intrigue of the 80s. Jordan and the Bulls were the show of the 90s. Kobe, Shaq, and the Lakers. Duncan and the Spurs were the teams of the 2000s. Bron and Curry were the faces of the 2010s. And the Warriors were the lone dynasty of that decade. So as we enter the latter half of the 2020s, what player, if any, and what team, if any, will take on the respective mantles?